Okay, let's turn our attention up to the board and see how this opener plays out. So we've done this work before. Okay, eyes and ears up to the board, please. Part of your quiz was to essentially do problems like this. One thing that's different is we're ending with the value of y. So this is actually an equation. What makes this an equation is that we have an equal sign. So when there's an equal sign, we're solving. Basically, our task right now is to solve for y by subbing in a value for x. Notice how I'm replacing x with -2 and using parentheses. I still got lots of you that aren't on board with that yet. These are good math habits. Okay, so much of what I'm working on with you all is building good math habits, which means when you sub things in, using parentheses, even if you're like, I can get to the right answer without that. I get it. We're building good math habits. Another good math habit that I'm doing up on this opener is one operation at a time, and I am showing my work. Doing one line, writing it down, one line, write it down. Okay, this is the work that I would like to see from you all. It makes a difference, and it is a skill. Okay, so once we sub the numbers in, it is just simply order of operations. So going through our gems, doing the grouping symbols first. There's no exponent, so then multiplication, then subtraction to get 7. For part B, after subbing it in, our grouping symbols are the absolute value brackets. -5 minus 3 is -8. The absolute value of -8, that is still a grouping symbol operation. That has me making -8, turning it to a +8, and then it becomes regular parentheses. By getting into regular parentheses, that gives me an idea as to what comes next, because when I have a number next to parentheses, that implies multiplication. So that's -16 plus 8, getting us to be -8. Okay. Well, that is essentially what this whole lesson is going to be about. Okay, is plugging values in, coming up with corresponding y values, and one thing we're going to add on to this is we're going to graph what some of these equations are showing. So we're going to actually work on graphing while we're evaluating. So in this lesson today, we will evaluate a function at several different values. Then we'll plot the points to be able to graph the function. This is always a way for how you can graph any equation. Okay, so as we get going with this all of our curriculum that we have planned for you, you're going to learn some rules of how to graph lines. This is a linear equation. We'll get to that later. And if you ever forget rules on how to graph something, you can always make a table of values, plug things in, and come up with points. So we've got a few examples we're going to do together, and then we'll get you working in your groups on some of this stuff as well. What's tricky about this one is we have fractions. So I'm going to teach us how we can do this with the fractions. So right now, I have my equation, y equals 3/5 x minus 4. If I know that x is -10, that's what this is saying right here. X is -10. So I'm going to replace the x in the equation with -10. So this is y equals 3/5 times -10 minus 4. We need more space. Now, we have to do some fractions here. Okay, we're going to learn how to deal with fractions right now. In order for me to multiply 3/5 times -10, I'm going to make -10 a fraction by putting it over 1. Then I need to multiply the numerators together, which are the tops of the fractions, and the denominators together. So this becomes y equals, and so I'm going to move my work up here. Y equals 3 times -10 is -30, divided by 5 times 1, which is 5, and then minus 4. Then order of operations has us doing division next. -30 divided by 5 is -6. And then we still have the minus 4, so -6 minus 4 Gets me to y equals -10. So when x is -10, y is also -10. So our first point is -10, comma, -10. We're going to do one more value together, and then I'm going to have you do 0, 5, and 10. So let's now plug in -5. So y equals 3 divided by 5 times -5 minus 4. Again, I apologize if there's not a lot of space here. Let's make this a fraction. And 3 times -5, I'm going to finish this work down here. So 3 times -5 is -15. 5 times 1 is 5. And we still have -4. Yeah, Annie, what you got? You don't have to. The reason I do it is because when I go to multiply these fractions, by me putting this over 1, I now know exactly what's in the bottom of the fractions and what's on the top, right? So when I multiply them, I got to do my tops of fractions together, or the numerators, and then the bottoms together. So by putting it over 1, it just allows my brain to register that. So do you have to? No. But it just gives you an idea of how to multiply the fractions. All right, then our division. -15 divided by 5 is -3. -3 minus 4 is -7. So this point is -5, comma, -7. Let's do 0. I'm going to have you do 5 and 10. When I plug in 0, 3/5 times 0 minus 4. What's anything times 0? It's just 0, so we don't need to do anything with that. It just becomes y equals 0 minus 4, which is -4. So we get 0, comma, -4. And why don't you all find the next two? Go and plug in 5 and 10. See what you get. We'll check it here in just a second. What you got, Nathan? You graphed like what? All right. Let's just make sure we got the correct y values before we go ahead and start to graph these functions. So when x is 5, after subbing everything in, I get 15 divided by 5 minus 4, which is 3 minus 4, giving me a y value of -1. So that point is 5, comma, -1. Then for 10, that one I had a little more space, so multiplied by 10 gives me 30 divided by 5. 30 divided by 5 is 6. 6 minus 4 is 2. And so now what we have come up with is a set of points representing this equation, and so we can plot those points to ultimately graph this line. So I have -10, -10, which is the very bottom corner of this graph. And this graph stinks and it's hard to see it. I think on your homework, yeah, the homework gets much more clear, much bigger. If you miss, make sure you pick it up. All right, then our next point is -5, -7. So -1, 2, 3, 4, 5, -1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Then 0, -4. And 5, 1. Something's wrong. What did I do wrong? No, it's something with me plotting this line. Where did I plot this point at? Yeah, I did a +1. And here's how I knew. We're going to always see patterns. And I see a pattern between these points, and I'm like, wait, this looks like it's going up by the same amount, and all of a sudden I'm going up by a lot more. So something was off. That should have been a -1, not +1. And the last value, 10, 2. And the last thing is after we connect or plot our points, we're going to connect the dots to make the full-on graph, which is a line. Okay. Before we move on. So our next equation on number 2. Okay, with this quadratic. Okay, and the reason I know it's quadratic is because of the squaring. And that's not something we need to necessarily start studying yet. But eventually, I want us to be able to look at this equation and know that it is a quadratic equation. Now, what we're going to do is the same thing we did before. We're going to plug in the values, and then we're going to evaluate them. Okay, and what we'll do in this box is we'll just plug it in. So it's y equals negative, then negative 4 plus 2 squared, and then plus 4. And so now I'll go ahead and do what's inside the parentheses first. So that's y equals negative. I got to do negative 4 plus 2, which is negative 2. Then square it, then add 4. Now, as I've been grading quizzes, a lot of us have been doing these orders incorrectly. Remember, we got to think gems. We just did the grouping symbols. After grouping symbols are exponents. So negative 2 squared. That means negative 2 times negative 2, which is positive 4. Notice that this negative out in front is still there. Okay, I have not applied that multiplying by negative 1 yet. That'll be the next thing I do is negative 1 times 4, making it negative 4. Negative 4 plus 4 makes this 0. Okay, so when x is negative 4, y is 0. So negative 4 comma 0. All right, we're going to do one more value and then have you all do the next 3 in your groups. Again, notice how I'm doing one thing at a time and writing steps. Want to see that exact same work? These are good math habits. It's not just me being picky. Okay, these are developing good math habits. All right, next one is negative 3. So we're going to start with y equals negative. Negative 3 plus 2 squared, and then plus 4. So negative 3 plus 2, do my grouping symbols first. Makes this negative 1. And squared and plus 4. Then, after the grouping symbols are my exponents. Negative 1 squared is negative 1 times negative 1, making a positive 1. And plus 4. And we have negative 1 times 1, which is negative 1 plus 4, which is 3. So we have negative 3, 3. All right, I want you all to do plug in negative 2, negative 1, and 0 on your own. After you get a value, check with your group. So I'll make this a little bit quicker to close out here. So let's move on to slide 3. Anyone want to take a guess what type of equation this is? What are those unique lines that we have around the x? Yeah, Catherine. Absolute value. This is an absolute value equation. And so the shape of the graph is either a V or an upside down V. And what makes it absolute value is the fact that we have those absolute value brackets. So now we're going to plug in a value. So 5, absolute value of negative 2 minus 8. It's going to give us our y. So the first thing that I'm going to do is my grouping symbols. There's nothing to do inside the absolute value brackets, and so we just need to take the absolute value of that number. Taking the absolute value means to make it positive. After making it positive, now those are regular parentheses. So we have minus 8. Now that I'm done with my grouping symbols, I move on to the exponents, which there are not any. So we'll go to multiplication, which is 10. 5 times 2 is 10. And minus 8, I get y equals 2. So here, this is negative 2, comma 2. Okay, I feel like we've done enough with the absolute values that I don't need to go over all of these, the rest of these numbers. So we'll just move on to the last one. And with the last one, this is going to be the harder out of all the ones you work on. This equation, in case you can't see it, didn't print that well, is 3 1/4 to the power of x minus 9. This is called an exponential function. And what makes it exponential is that the exponent is a variable. And it's going to either be kind of like a backwards letter J, or kind of like the letter J itself. I guess that's the letter J. This is the backwards one. Okay, so that sort of shape. Now, the reason why this one gets tricky, some of us are really good with exponents. I don't know that many of us are good with exponents when they are fractions. You're going to be highly encouraged to use a calculator here. In fact, why don't we get out calculators if you have one? If you don't have one, send one person from your group to check one out. We're just going to have one per group. One per group.